Welcome to Leadership Luminaries Lounge with Kerry and Peggy O'Neill, a podcast about the connection of leadership, philosophy, practice, and impact on society. Get ready to be illuminated.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two of our conversation with Seth Spurlock, the CEO of BCS Chemical. And our conversation is around faith in leadership. And so in part one, and I'm not going to read his bio because he's really got a extensive bio and got a few things that he has done. But the issue and the reason that I invited Seth to be part of this conversation is because of his focus on faith in his organization and in his business. And in the first part of the conversation, we spent a good bit of time talking about how his faith principles, he uses that to set the foundation and culture of the business. And so I'd like to now kind of get into some of the issues around faith. And you know, and we probably all had some experiences on that. Sometimes when people believe that you're a person of faith, like me, I'm actually an ordained minister. And sometimes people, when I'm operating in the business role or a leadership role, they will assume that means that I will not uphold a performance standard or that I will sometimes let things slide. And because of, part of the principles of Christian faith is forgiveness. And I understand that. But to me, sometimes I think that it gets taken advantage of people of faith. So, Seth, how do you deal with that? You mentioned a lot in the first part about the level of standards and performance that carries through. How do you deal with those issues?
Those are very hard, I think. It's the personnel issues. It's wonderful when, we've got a job opening, we interview people, we bring them in, we create a job. Maybe it's a career opportunity for them that they've always wished for, prayed for, and yet here it is. And that's wonderful. But we also have employees who come along and either they're not a good fit, we made a mistake, and they're fit into business. They don't want to fit into the culture of the company, or things change in their own personal lives and they change as a result of that, for whatever reasons outside of the business. But regardless, you may have a personnel issue. And I think that perception is accurate. I think that someone could look at that and say, if you take somebody who's, former background in the military or something else, they say, oh, this person's very direct, very harsh, very, disciplined, and that's going to be the case. And maybe they look at this and go, oh, nice person, or just trying to be, and so he's not going to be able to enforce or won't follow up. And I would just tell you that fortunately, after been in the industry for so long, my personal situation is your reputation kind of gets out there and people realize there is a level that you can get to, and it'll be opportunity to correct yourself, but there is a level that, you can't go beyond. I don't know how others might see that, but I think that is a risk for any person who is basic principles around faith and Christianity about implementing what they're doing in the business. But on a personal level, for me, I think what we look at is the way we just follow our procedures. I always say we always do it the hard way. We always do it the long way. If somebody's got an issue, we follow the procedure of counseling them one-on-one with their direct manager, trying to do some corrective action. If it's a personal issue like drugs or alcohol, we try to separate them from that situation if we have to, especially in the chemical business. Our standard is it's black or white, it's right or wrong. It can't be close enough. It's inherent in our business. We operate by the natural laws. If you do this, that will happen. And that can be life or death in the chemical manufacturing business and around safety and environmental stewardship. So, they really have to get on board with that theme of accuracy and doing things correctly. But we also realize people make mistakes. And so, what we try to do is we counsel them on at the very front end of saying, look, here's what you did, we trained on this or we didn't train on that. That's on us. Here's what we're going to train. Here's the expectations, and let's make a correction. If there's a second incident, then we kind of ratchet it up to the next level of, look, the second time around, just standard, what I call HR, philosophy. And at the end, if they can't get there, it's a very unpleasant decision, but it's not inconsistent with, again, what I would say biblical teachings, is if you allow the scoffer to continue to be there and degrading everything you're saying and degrading your business and the reputations and doing all that, then you're going to get more of it. And so if you can't address it after that third time, we try to be very diplomatic, but say, look, we're going to have to part ways here. You're going to have to do something else because this is how we operate. And I was a little blunt maybe early with, with Peggy's question about, what if somebody doesn't want to be on board with that? And it's just not an option. I mean, you have to operate in a certain way or you're jeopardizing everyone's employment and the attitude of everyone there, and the safety of what's going on. And that's just, maybe there are other businesses where, those things can happen and it doesn't jeopardize people. It might jeopardize your company's reputation or the product quality. But in our business, it's just way too. We handle highly hazardous materials in rail car quantities. I mean, these are significant issues, and they can have major consequences. And so, and the people we bring in and recruit understand that. And for the most part, we've seen it go all the way. We've seen it where people will say, okay, yeah, I'm get with it, and they change, and they've been here for 10, 20 years. And we see some that just can't get past it, and some people have psychological or mental health issues that you're not aware of, and they just lash out, and you got way too much emotion going on, and there's just certain environments, Kerry, you can't have that in. And in chemical manufacturing, I can assure you is one of them. It'd be like, so you're working in a you're
That
working in a
rockets and bomb
working in a
making, right?
gunpowder factory, man.
Yeah.
You don't want somebody getting all
But it
irritated. And
actually also
so
in any environment, I mean, I hear you that, I mean, yes, that's
yeah,
a specific environment around a lot of things, employee engagement. But like you're also saying, or just to add to it, is that really it serves everybody in any organization when standards are kept, because then people aren't sitting around wondering, oh, well, they worked with that person. Are they going to work with me? Or they didn't work with
yes,
that person, and it's sloppy around here. I mean, it makes people really uncomfortable, and it diminishes the quality of relationships. It's the trust starts falling and so on. So in any organization, I
I
think it's
agree,
very
Peggy.
important to
You
keep.
you you're I mean, I think that's a real gem of a statement because it brings out something I didn't say, but it's that consistency is also in leadership that somebody's looking for, and not favoritism. That's just it's like political organizations, and I've been unfortunately part of companies like that early in my career, and you just don't want to be around it. I didn't want to be, and if people start seeing it or sensing it, it's what it leads to is more. You're going to get more of that, and you get more people what I call gaming the system. No matter what policies or procedures you put out there, people figure out ways to work them around, whether it's holidays or time or whatever it is. But if you're consistent in it, people say, okay, this is what we can do. This is the area. And I think people generally appreciate that, and they don't want to look over there and say, why is that person? And you also, all of us, we can't talk about HR issues, but we can say we all know what the standard is. And if you're seeing it and it seems inconsistent, we see it too. You should be assured that everybody's going to be given their chance to correct these practices without saying, somebody's doing this or Steve is doing that or whatever, because that's not only is that inappropriate, it's probably illegal, but it's unfair, to be bringing out those issues. But we also want to let people know we see what's going on and it will be addressed in its proper time. And I've told my children that as well, who are in management positions, is that if anybody has to be separated from the business or has a bad review, you have to get out ahead of that. They should see that coming like a train down the track. It should not be a surprise. I've heard all these stories about, oh, this person was called in, they thought they were getting a promotion and they were terminated. I mean, that's just pathetic management to me. If the management hasn't not just had to read the tea leaves, I mean, that's where you got to just be blunt, and say, look, we've done this and we've done that. If this happens again, here's where we're at. We don't want that to happen. Let's change you and put you over in this other role or do whatever we can do. But man, there should never be a surprise. That's just to me, that is weak leadership, I think. And if I don't want to do that, I told myself that early in my career, if I don't want to do that, I don't want to do the ugly thing, I should get out. I should do something else. And I never ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't do. And I tell them that, look, we're at this point to say these things to this person. I'll go with you. I'll do it with you. But if you're in that role, you got to be there, because if you can't be there with me and you can't do it next time, you're not in that role, and I would say 100% of the time, the person will go and take care of it themselves, or I'll go with them and they'll say what they have to say. And sometimes it makes you really uncomfortable. I mean, but it's not nearly as horrible as not being just direct with people. And I've had people we've terminated before and tell me they appreciated our honesty, and that, there was said I would have done the same thing. I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, I would I'd be
Also,
I'd be mad, but I mean,
also, it's just I care enough about you to tell you the truth, and I care enough about you to try to help you early on anyway, try to help you improve. I believe in you early on. I mean, if it keeps not working out, then of course that conversation shifts. But at the beginning, it's like, I care enough about you and the whole organization that we're going to be honest.
have you seen people do that and get that feedback and make changes to the positive side? I mean, we know not all
Oh,
of them
yeah.
do, but
I
I
mean,
mean,
that's my whole, I've been a coach for 30 something years. So yeah.
yeah. Isn't that rewarding when you actually do that? And somebody said, well, maybe nobody ever said that to them before, or they realized you weren't going to come up to that level, or whatever.
And they rise up and yeah.
One of the things though that you pointed out, Seth, and I think I'd like to kind of go back to that, is picking the right people, particularly in your leadership team. And so sometimes, even though you may have, particularly leaders and managers, you kind of go through similar experiences and you have that leadership look, so to speak, the resume looks, but you really need to spend some time to get to know your leaders, because of the fact that you have to depend on them to carry the culture when you're not around. So how do you deal with that? There's lots of biblical examples of even strong leaders like apostles that decided, hey, we can't be on the same team. I can't trust you to I can't trust you to make that hard to say that hard thing when we're both together, because you kind of let me down. So therefore, I'm not challenging your authority, not challenging your belief system, but we can't walk together in this task.
Right. And I think that's I don't know, that's maybe the art of leadership is, picking people. I don't know how, I mean, I feel like it's, and I'm sure all the people who report to me would agree. I pick really good people, right? I mean, that's self-serving. Of course, they always agree,
We're all great. Yeah, you made a wonderful.
Listening to this.
No, whenever we have a meeting and I say I pick really good people, nobody says, "Oh, well, you've got a really bad, you're really bad at picking people." But that's one of the fortunate things I've done, and I guess some of it is I'm never afraid, and they would agree with this too. I'm never afraid to hire people who are smarter than I am, because they are, I mean, it's just if you get people that you have a high degree of confidence in, and it takes time, and you have to get into situations and let them develop and say, how are you going to handle that? And pretty soon, they're handling it on their own. And it's development over years, not individual times. But I've been very fortunate and blessed as well to say that, the people I've been able to recruit and bring in have been just really excellent. And that puts our company, and it has been for that whole time. I mean, I have outside customers and suppliers have told me over the years, oh, you always end up with these really great people, and we do. And these were in previous companies that I was at, who were, you read that long resume, where we did leverage buyouts, we sold and whatever, and they were really good people. And some of them I still work with occasionally, but the people we have now are even better. And it's just, you think, oh, those were the good old days, and the good old days are now. I mean, and those people who I work with have gone on to some stellar careers, and they're customers of ours and suppliers of ours, and I still keep really good relationships with those people. And so I feel really fortunate picking those people and developing them. And the other is taking the time for, what I try to do is spend time. We were talking about those principles earlier, Peggy, about, what does the company believe in? What are our business principles? We set that up as a management group. I didn't come down, from with the tablets, I may look like it, but I didn't, But I came, I said, here's what we started with, because I was here before they were, but we went through this iteratively over multiple years. And then we look at it quarterly as we do our strategic business review and say, do these still make sense? Now some of them are carved in stone, like we're going to operate our business this way. But are these the principles around, are we stating this correctly around our safety goals, our environmental stewardship, about how we're going to operate the business, things like that. And we all review them. And then as we go out and we start every presentation with customers or suppliers or whoever comes in, company overview, here's the name of the company, blah, blah, blah. And then, here are our principles. And it starts with, we're going to operate our business in a moral and ethical manner. And I always tell them, please tell everyone that doesn't mean that's I'm not saying I am this moral and ethical person. I tell you, that's how we're trying to operate our business. And if we're doing anything different than that, please say so. And because I'm going to tell you that we can do that on an individual or corporate level. And if I'm doing something that just seems inconsistent with that, just, let's talk about it. And maybe we disagree. I don't, people have different viewpoints on all that, but we can talk about it and go through that. And that's up to them to tell our customers, here's how we operate our business. And then we start talking about, the chemistry and the markets and, these different things and our capabilities. But that's the basis that we come from. I mean, most companies have that on the wall, but I mean, we try to, I said, you don't have to belabor every point and go through this, but you have to pick the salient ones that are really important to these customers. And you at least have to talk about the top one because that takes care of everything else. Because it's like I said earlier, is if you follow a certain belief system and faith, in God, everything else is going to kind of take care of itself. All these different aspects of your life and leadership, and how diligent you are in your leadership, and how you portray yourself, and what people want to see. And if you're humble, if you recognize your shortcomings, I mean, try to get out ahead of them. There's ample opportunities. I mean, Kerry, this. Just ask your children, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they'll tell me. Yeah.
It's just like, come on. That's how I feel like, and I've done the 360 feedback and I try to take that seriously and look at it and say, where can I improve? What am I doing that, that's inconsistent with these things, and then correct it, not just defend it, like, oh yeah, well, because that's who you can fall into. And I think it's a daily routine, so that's kind of how I go about it. But what I was really hoping for, and I'd say this to both of you, is that I really welcome the opportunity to talk about this because like all of you, both of you, you spend a lot of time thinking about these things and how can they have an impact. And I really hope if there's a million people who see this program and say, I'm encouraged, if there's just one person or both of you, just say, you know what, there are times and opportunities where I just got to step out on faith and do this. And I think for all of us, it's that edge of not foolishly, and that comes with time, I think, in our own experience, but just that you're doing it and saying, this is clearly I've gotten to this point. And Kerry, I would know that you and I have talked about this before, but it's even doing things like we're doing at the university. You just say, I really felt like this is something I wanted to do and could do. And I don't know whether it's to finish a doctorate program or it was to participate in this program, to reach one person who says, you know what, I want to do better. I can do better. If this guy can do it, sure, anybody can do it. And I think that would be wonderful. And so I really hope out of your program, people are encouraged to think about think about these things ahead of time. So they're not in that situation and then wondering, what's my core belief in this? And when they get in these situations, I always think all the business aspects are critical and important, but it's that individual one. It's that person who is at the end that's the most difficult. And it's the people I'm going to see next week, and it's the people who are having loss in their life, and it's also the ones who are thinking about getting married and having children or making a career change. How do you talk to them in a way that lifts them up and encourages them in a positive way to do, to get choice, but also leave room for, hey, you're not in control, I mean, at the end of the day, it's there is something greater out there, and I encourage them to think about that. I think one of the greatest research questions, and I mentioned this to you before, who is Jesus, right? Because I think you have to come to a conclusion at some point in your life and think about that and say, who is he? Was he a historical figure? Was he a prophet? Was he whatever? But that's what we're called to ask. I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm here to plant the seed, and that's all he asks us to do, and he will take care of the rest of it. But I think that's one people just don't want to hear. They just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he said that, But it's the question of a life, and so I think you deal with it and make your decision.
Appreciate that. I'm gonna have to use this aspect of my other ministry work there too. So thank you for doing that evangelistic work for me. What one thing I do wanted to kind of go back to, and you have a pretty extensive experience with private equity. Private equity, it seems like, has really because of and I'm not, as we talked about before, and one of the things that examples that I like to use is the CEO of Shopify, where he says, we're not a family, we're a high performing team. private equity has gotten the perspective of the only thing that they're interested in is a quick return on their investment, quick profitability, regardless of the means to get there. Can you give me your experience and also how you feel? Because if people were to not get a chance to know you, it would almost seem like it's an enigma that a man of faith leading a company would come from the private equity world.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting perspective, first of all, because I had never really thought about it as being inconsistent through the time. And my experience now was probably 20 years ago, so it's been a while. But there's a lot of private equity money out there. There's so many companies, there's so much money chasing transactions anymore. So if people were going to come in contact with that, I think if you're in a leadership role, where people try and buy divisions or whatever. But what I saw, and I heard this because I've talked to 50 different private equity groups in my career or more, but probably 15 were looking at acquisitions of business. And they have the routine of saying always, it's like, we're investing in the management team. We're investing in the management. It's all about the management team, and you're hearing that was one of you're also hearing what you just said, which is yeah, as long as you deliver, right? So that's their perspective on it. And I think if you can find a group that really is interested in the management team, who sees that as where the value is being created in the business, you're really pretty much independent. And I was, I mean, and it might have just been the people that we were involved with, a very big, large bank out of New York. They had billions of dollars in play, and they really were just invested in the business. We laid out the long-term plan, said what we needed to do. They helped us raise capital to do this. That's where we did all the acquisitions. And they were very much hands-off. They were not chemistry people, they were financial. And they didn't put anybody on our board who was chemistry, start telling me, what to do or anything else. It was more like, okay, here's the plan. We believe in you. Let's go with it. As long as you stay on track. They supported that. They didn't get involved in any of the aspects of business. I wouldn't say day to day. I'd say quarter to quarter. It's like we'd see how we were doing financially. And so I didn't get any pressure to do anything other than that. And I never really talked about that much of the philosophy of the business, whatever. They just left that to me. They're like, Kerry, the way I looked at it is they had one thing that they could do is either keep me or get rid of me, because they were not going to get involved in the business. They had a trap door under my desk, and I knew it. And if as long as it was happy, they were happy. Yeah, I sat in my seat. If not, they pull the lever and that was that. And that's just kind of the way they did it. Now, there may be other groups, and I know there are some that put people on boards and there are different sizes, but we had a successful run. I mean, we ran it for 7 years and then sold it. And then I was stayed on for 3 more years in transition. And it hit every kind of metric, you talked about, and what financial, the investment that was made, the annual returns that were made, exiting at a good multiple, leaving the employees in a bigger company with great opportunities. I mean, the whole thing, if you did a case study on how it can work well, it worked. And I was very, very fortunate to be part of that. And I learned a lot along the way. And then when I left there, I applied the financial aspects of it to my own personal situation, except for one thing, which is not to leverage up and to live my life debt free. And that was a huge change, because at that time we had $100 million in syndicated debt out there that we owed, and we paid it all off, and everybody was happy. Everybody made a lot of money, and it was really good. But I also learned I don't want to be in debt. I didn't like answering, to groups of banks and things like that. And so I tried to live my life within the harvest, as it said, and that's again starting very small and working my way back through that. It's worked out extremely well, and that's the opposite of private equity, because people talk to me now about borrowing money. We could do this and do that. And it's like, yeah, that's great, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to I don't want to be a slave to the lender. Another way you can read the Bible, and you just get all these things that we think we're discovering, but it's all right there for all these centuries to learn from. And so that was my experience. I don't think it was in conflict at all. And I'm sure there's private equity that's just the opposite. Again, it probably depends on the group you get involved with and selecting the right. We selected the right private equity group because we actually hired a consultant to help us do this, bring in all the people and do all the stuff. We selected that group, and it's worked out very well. So it can, doesn't
I
mean it
think
will.
that you came on something that was really key there too, is that you need to be careful that who you do business with
Right.
actually have a shared sense of value also.
Yes. That's a great point. And I wasn't thinking about this is 25 years ago, maybe, I don't know, 30, about that. But I think, picking the right group has worked well. But I think, and now there's so many more. I mean, it was kind of novel, 30 years ago. But I mean, now there's so many, everybody raises private equity, billions of dollars of funds. And, you can interview people all day long and find the right group. And they do have different, I think they realize there are different segments of the questions you're raising, and they may say the right things, but you got to look into it and talk to the people of the business that they currently own or manage, and ones who have gone through the process. And most of the CEOs of these companies, you call them up, they're gonna tell you. I mean, it's not, if somebody called me and said, "Hey, what do you think about these guys?" and I would just flat out, it's just kind of part of the job. It kind of goes with it. If it's good or bad, I wouldn't do it, or I would do it, or they're pretty good, or and then they also change people as well. So you kind of have to have kind of multiple layers of relationships there, because these are all young, uh, highly educated, folks from the top business schools, and they're just cranking through deals. And so one or two, like in our 7 years, we had probably three, people who were representing the private equity. So you got to kind of get to know their group a little bit. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think I think it's a word of caution. It's not inherently negative, but I do think it's, you got to spend time making sure you pick the right group. Yeah.
Peggy, any thoughts that you have, and as we kind of wrap up part two of this conversation?
Yeah.
Well, what I appreciate is like what you were talking about with your leadership team, but I heard it throughout everything you said. There's a lot of communication and sharing of like you said, principles and expectations, and letting people be involved in the process of how are we going to work together and what are our principles, and so I just think that's so key in business, is for people to feel like they belong, they're involved, they matter. And that's just what I hear, that you seem to be, I don't, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be a lot of guidance from within, or your focus is on people and relationships, and using the principles that support relationships, and as well as the business success. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate how you talked about that today, shared that today, and the value of faith, whatever one's faith is, whether it is Christianity or something else, that where people have a sense of something bigger than we are. That I think
Right.
that's critical to
Yeah.
living life and to success in business.
Yeah, what are people going to say about you? What's your reputation? When you get a core group of people and you're consistent in that belief, and it's not just one person, but the group, the top management group, it's very powerful, because I think that's what people want. It goes back to the seminars you're saying you lead. People want that, and then they want you to be. I think we all want that in our leaders, and we try to, as best as we can all be, when you're in that and you're leading that program like you were doing. They want you to go up there and go, wow, Peggy's really good. She's very thoughtful about all this stuff. She knows what she's doing. She's looking out for everybody's best interest. She understands, the personal relation. You're not just hammering through some agenda, of some business meeting. And people see that. I mean, and so you tend to attract better people that way. I think they want to come and they want to participate in your event and get to know you, and they respect your opinion when you give it. You don't have to give it a long preamble. You can just say, based on your experience, here's what you think. And I think that, I do think people are looking for that. And I think we all, Kerry and I have talked about this some, is we all want, we all have these principles, that you have, and then you want the person who heads that up to be somebody you're really proud of. And I always look at that as a responsibility, for me personally. I don't want to embarrass the people that I'm around, or my family. And,
Yeah.
I probably do, it's like everything else, but I'm not probably, I know I do, because again, you get your kids to tell you, Dad, don't do that, But I think it's important that people, and I think it's part of the role. And one of the courses we had is talking about that leadership and that image. You have to play the part sometimes, and there's a lot of times I don't want to play that part, but I know that it goes with the job. And so you just get out there and do it. And I think, Peggy, I think what you're talking about as well is just, people look for that, and you got to recognize that's part of your leadership role, whether you like it or not, and get out there and do it, greet the people, hug the person, go to the funeral, go to the baby shower or the baby that's born, and and go out and meet their kids when they come to visit the office, because they want to show that, oh, this is the president of the company. They don't know me from either of you two, but they get to say, oh, my mom introduced me to the president of the company. Ooh, and that you want to make them feel good about that. I mean, I do, and I think it's little things, and all those things I just said to you, that's been like the last 3 weeks for me, or 2 weeks, and it's going to be the next 2 weeks. It's the job, it goes on and on and on. And I don't know. I just found it a very interesting conversation, and I really do appreciate you thinking of me to invite me onto the program, and I hope it's positive to anybody who has this, and if we want to do it again, or if y'all want to come out and visit actually when you're in town,
I do want to come out and visit. Yeah, I'd like to hang out with you.
Been great engaging with
Yeah.
you. Yeah. So Kerry, you want to, where
Well, again, our guest today has been Seth Spurlock, the CEO of BCS Chemicals, and my friend and colleague from the Doctor of Business Administration program at Georgia State. And it's been a real pleasure chatting with you. It's always a pleasure. You and I get together and we chat all the time. It's kind of that's the way we, I guess we old guys get together and chat all the time. It's, at school. But I appreciate you spending the time with you. And for anyone else listening to this, I do hope, just as Seth said, that you were able to get some piece of useful information out of this. But regardless, the idea is we want you to let your light shine. So until we talk again, thanks for spending a little time with us.